When you think of Las Vegas today, you think of massive luxury resorts, choreographed fountains dancing to music, world-class restaurants helmed by celebrity chefs. This version of Vegas, the one that markets itself as a destination for luxury and spectacle rather than just gambling, didn't exist 40 years ago. And the man most responsible for creating it was a kid from Connecticut who took over his father's bingo business at 21 years old and turned it into a multi-billion-dollar empire that would reshape the Las Vegas Strip forever. His name was Steve Wynn, and this is his story. He didn't just build hotels. He reimagined what a casino resort could be, pushing the industry from smoky gambling halls into the era of experiential luxury. He created the Mirage, which kicked off the greatest building boom in Vegas history. He built Bellagio, which brought fine art and European elegance to the desert. He constructed Wynn Las Vegas, at the time the most expensive privately funded construction project in American history. Along the way, he became one of the most powerful men in Nevada, a billionaire with influence that stretched from the Strip to Macau to the highest levels of American politics. But his story doesn't end there, because in 2018, everything came crashing down. Allegations of sexual misconduct spanning decades emerged, and the man who built modern Vegas was forced out of his own company, his legacy permanently complicated by the accusations of how he treated the people who worked inside the resorts he built. This is the complete story of Steve Wynn's time in Las Vegas, the vision, the ambition, the transformation of an entire city, and the fall from grace that ended it all. Chapter 1. The Bingo King's Son. Stephen Allen Weinberg was born on January 27, 1942, in New Haven, Connecticut. His father, Michael, ran gambling operations on the East Coast, primarily bingo parlors in Maryland. When Steve was still a boy, his father changed the family name from Weinberg to Wynn. It was a business decision, making the family name more palatable. The Wynns were in the gambling business, and image mattered. Steve grew up around his father's operations. While other kids spent their summers at camp or playing baseball, Steve was learning the gambling business from the inside. He watched his father manage the bingo halls, handle the money, deal with employees and customers. He was learning, even if he didn't know it yet, how to run a gaming operation. More importantly, he was learning that in the gambling business, the house always wins if you control the experience and the real estate. Despite the family business, Steve's father wanted him to have a proper education. He sent Steve to the University of Pennsylvania, to the prestigious Wharton School. Steve officially studied English literature, but his real education continued to come from watching his father's business. He'd spend his breaks and summers back in Maryland, working in the bingo parlors, understanding the operations from every angle. Then, in 1963, just before Steve's graduation, everything changed. His father died. Steve was 21 years old, about to graduate from an Ivy League university, and suddenly he was the head of the family business. And that business, it turned out, was in serious trouble. The family's bingo operations were reportedly $350,000 in debt. For a young man barely out of college, this should have been overwhelming, but Steve didn't panic. Instead, he did what his father had trained him to do. He took over the operations, stabilized the business, and started paying down the debt. Within a couple of years, he'd not only saved the family business, but had made it profitable again. But Steve Wynn wasn't content to run bingo parlors in Maryland for the rest of his life. His eyes were turning westward, to a city in the Nevada desert that was just beginning its transformation from mob-run gambling town to corporate casino capital. He was looking at Las Vegas. Chapter 2. Arrival on the Strip. In 1967, Steve Wynn made his move. Using profits and contacts from the bingo business, he bought a small stake in the Frontier Hotel on the Las Vegas Strip. It wasn't a controlling stake. It wasn't even a major stake, but it was enough. It was a foothold. That same year, Steve and his wife Elaine packed up and moved from Maryland to Las Vegas. Steve became an executive and part owner at the Frontier. The Frontier in the late 60s was a second-tier strip property. It wasn't the Sands, where the Rat Pack performed. It wasn't the Desert Inn, where Howard Hughes was living in the penthouse. But it was on the Strip, and for Steve Wynn, that was what mattered. This was his crash course in the Las Vegas casino business. He learned how the Strip properties operated, how they differed from the bingo halls back east, how the power structures worked. He was dealing with corporate executives, with regulators, and with people who had connections to the old mob families that still maintained influence in Vegas. Steve was learning, absorbing everything, understanding that owning and operating a strip casino was different from running a bingo parlor. The stakes were higher, the money was bigger, and the opportunities were enormous. But he also understood something that would define his entire career. The Frontier, like most Vegas casinos at the time, was primarily a gambling hall with some hotel rooms attached. It was functional, not luxurious. It drew customers by offering cheap rooms, cheap food, and a place to gamble. The casino was the entire point of the building. Steve Wynn started to wonder, what if that wasn't the only way to do it? But before he could test that theory on the Strip, he needed more experience and more capital. So in the late 1960s, he turned his attention to downtown Las Vegas, to a property called the Golden Nugget. Chapter 3. Downtown Luxury. The Golden Nugget in the late 1960s was rough around the edges. It was one of many gambling halls on Fremont Street in downtown Las Vegas, catering primarily to locals and low rollers. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't glamorous. It was a place to play cards and pull slot machine handles. And that was about it. But Steve Wynn saw potential. Using his profits from the Frontier and the relationships he'd built in Vegas, Steve bought into the Golden Nugget in the late 60s. By 1973, he'd gained control of the property and became chairman and chief executive officer of Golden Nugget, Incorporated. This became his main development vehicle, his laboratory for testing ideas. And Steve Wynn had ideas, big ones. His strategy for the Golden Nugget was radical for downtown Vegas. Turn a rough gambling hall into a luxury resort, not on the Strip, where high-end properties at least existed, but right in the middle of gritty Fremont Street, surrounded by much cheaper, rougher competitors. People thought he was crazy. Why would high rollers come downtown when they could stay at fancier Strip properties? Steve didn't care what people thought. He started pouring money into the Golden Nugget. He built a new hotel tower. He added upscale restaurants that served actual haute cuisine instead of 99-cent shrimp cocktails. He hired top designers to create high-end interiors. He focused obsessively on details that other downtown properties ignored. The carpets, the lighting, the way the casino floor sounded, even the smell of the property. Then he did something brilliant. He recruited Frank Sinatra and other A-list entertainers to perform at the Golden Nugget, and just as importantly, to be seen hanging out there. Suddenly, the Golden Nugget wasn't just another downtown casino. It was the place where famous people went when they visited Vegas. It was a boutique luxury property, a concept that didn't really exist in Las Vegas at the time, especially not downtown. The strategy worked. The Golden Nugget became one of the most profitable downtown properties. High-limit players started coming specifically to play at Wynn's casino. His obsession with details, with creating a complete luxury experience rather than just operating gambling tables, had paid off. And Steve Wynn had learned an invaluable lesson. People would pay for luxury, for experience, for atmosphere. They would pay for more than just the opportunity to gamble. In 1980, Steve expanded outside Nevada, opening Golden Nugget Atlantic City. It was successful, proving his model could work beyond Vegas. But ultimately, Steve sold the Atlantic City property and refocused on Nevada, because by the mid-1980s, he was ready to test his theories on a much bigger stage. He was ready to transform the Las Vegas Strip itself. Chapter 4. The Mirage and the birth of the mega resort. By the mid-1980s, the Las Vegas Strip was in trouble. Atlantic City had opened for casino gambling, breaking Nevada's monopoly on legal casino gaming in the United States. Other states were beginning to legalize various forms of gambling. The Strip properties, many built in the 50s and 60s, were looking dated. Tourism growth was slowing. Industry analysts were openly questioning whether Vegas's best days were behind it. Steve Wynn saw an opportunity. He evolved Golden Nugget Incorporated into a development company built around a single, audacious project. He was going to build a completely new kind of resort on the Strip, something Vegas had never seen before. He was going to build the Mirage. The concept was revolutionary. Instead of a casino with some hotel rooms attached, the Mirage would be a destination resort where the casino was just one part of a much larger entertainment and luxury experience. The theme was tropical, South Seas inspired, with lush landscaping and palm trees creating an oasis in the desert. There would be a massive erupting volcano out front on the Strip, visible to anyone driving by. Inside, a dolphin habitat, white tiger exhibits featuring Siegfried and Roy, and a tropical jungle atrium. The restaurants would be upscale. The rooms would be luxurious. Every detail would be carefully designed to create spectacle and wonder. People would come for the experience, Steve believed, and the gambling would follow. There was just one problem: the price tag. The Mirage was projected to cost over $500 million, eventually blowing past estimates to reach about $630 million. In the late 1980s, this was an almost unimaginable sum for a casino resort. No one had ever bet that much money on a single Las Vegas property. The financing alone was a revolution. Steve arranged for $525 million in high-yield bonds, so-called junk bonds, through Drexel Burnham Lambert and the infamous financier Michael Milken. When the Mirage opened on November 22, 1989, industry analysts were skeptical. The property needed to generate roughly $1 million per day just to cover its debt service. That seemed impossible. How could any casino, no matter how spectacular, consistently generate that much revenue? Steve Wynn was about to prove them all wrong. The Mirage was an immediate, overwhelming success. People came in droves to see the volcano, to watch the dolphins, to experience Siegfried and Roy's magic show, to eat at the upscale restaurants, and yes, to gamble. Tourism to Las Vegas jumped 16% in 1990, one of the biggest one-year increase in the city's history. And it wasn't just the Mirage that benefited. The entire Strip was revitalized. More importantly, the Mirage became a template. It proved that you could spend massive amounts of money on spectacle and luxury, and people would come. Other casino companies took notice. Within a few years, the Strip would see an unprecedented building boom. Excalibur, Luxor, Treasure Island, MGM Grand, New York, Bellagio, Paris, Las Vegas, Mandalay Bay, the Venetian. All of them were trying to recreate or surpass what Steve Wynn had done with the Mirage. Steve Wynn hadn't just built a successful casino. He'd reimagined what a Las Vegas resort could be, and in doing so, he'd kicked off the transformation of the Strip into what it is today. The era of the mega resort had begun, and Steve Wynn was the man who started it, but he wasn't done building. Chapter 5: Treasure Island and the family-friendly experiment. Riding high on the Mirage's success, Steve Wynn turned his attention to the property's parking lot. He was going to build another resort, right next door. This one would be called Treasure Island. Treasure Island, which opened in 1993, cost about $430 million. The theme was pirates, with a massive ship, battle stunt show, taking place in a bay, out front every night, visible from the Strip, designed to pull in foot traffic. The positioning was different from the Mirage. While the Mirage targeted upscale tourists and high rollers, Treasure Island was aimed at the mass market. It was more family-friendly, more accessible, more focused on spectacle than subtle luxury. This was also the era when Las Vegas was trying to rebrand itself as a family destination, a strategy that would ultimately fail but seemed promising in the early 90s. Treasure Island fit into this vision with its pirate theme and stunt shows that kids could enjoy. But Steve Wynn also did something at Treasure Island that would have lasting impact on Las Vegas entertainment. He brought in Cirque du Soleil, the innovative Canadian circus company, to create their first permanent Las Vegas show. Mystère opened at Treasure Island and became a massive hit, launching Cirque du Soleil's dominance in Vegas entertainment that continues to this day. Within a few years, Cirque shows would be at properties all over the Strip, but it started at Treasure Island, with Steve Wynn taking a chance on an unconventional production. Treasure Island was successful, but it wasn't the Mirage. It proved that Steve could build profitably at different price points and for different audiences. But for his next project, he wanted to go in the opposite direction. He wanted to build something even more luxurious than the Mirage, something that would push Vegas into true high-end luxury territory. He wanted to build a resort inspired by European elegance and old-world sophistication. He wanted to build Bellagio. Chapter 6: Bellagio and the Fountains. On October 15th, 1998, Bellagio opened on the Las Vegas Strip. The price tag, $1.6 billion. At the time, it was the most expensive hotel in the world. Steve Wynn had demolished a classic Vegas property, the old Dunes Casino, and in its place built something that Vegas had never seen before. The name came from the Italian town of Bellagio on Lake Como, though Steve had originally wanted to call the project Beau Rivage. He saved that name for a later project in Biloxi, Mississippi. Everything about Bellagio was designed to evoke European luxury and sophistication. The centerpiece was the Fountains of Bellagio, an 8.5-acre lake out front with choreographed water shows set to music. The fountains would become one of the most iconic images of Las Vegas, featured in movies, television shows, and millions of tourist photographs. They still draw crowds every day, people lined up along the Strip railings to watch water dance. But the fountains were just the beginning. Inside, Bellagio featured a massive art collection, with works by Picasso and other masters displayed throughout the property. The Bellagio Gallery of Fine Art brought museum-quality exhibitions to Las Vegas. The restaurants were helmed by celebrity chefs, pushing Vegas firmly into the world of high-end dining. The botanical gardens featured elaborate seasonal displays. The casino itself, while still present and profitable, felt more like part of an elegant resort than the main attraction. Natural light flooded through the spaces. Fresh flowers were everywhere. The design emphasized sophistication and restraint rather than over-the-top theming. This wasn't pirates or volcanoes or Egypt. This was Como. This was Monte Carlo. This was Vegas saying it could compete with the most sophisticated destinations in the world. Bellagio's success cemented several trends in Las Vegas. First, it proved that ultra-luxury could work on the Strip at an even higher level than the Mirage had demonstrated. Second, it established fine dining and art as legitimate draws for Vegas tourism, not just gambling and shows. Third, it inspired a new wave of high-end development, with competitors racing to build their own luxury properties. The late 90s and early 2000s saw the Venetian, Paris, Las Vegas, and Mandalay Bay all open, each trying to capture some of what Bellagio had achieved. Steve Wynn had once again changed the game. He'd proven that Vegas could be a legitimate luxury destination, not just a place where rich people came to gamble, but a place where affluent tourists came for world-class experiences. By the late 90s, Steve Wynn controlled 3 of the most important properties on the Strip: the Mirage, Treasure Island, and Bellagio. His company, Mirage Resorts, was one of the most powerful casino operators in the world. He'd also expanded to the Gulf Coast with Beau Rivage and Biloxi, which opened in 1999 and became the largest hotel casino outside Nevada, bringing the Vegas playbook to regional markets. Steve Wynn had built an empire. And then, in 2000, he did something surprising. He sold it. Chapter 7: The Sale in the Desert. In the year 2000, MGM Grand Incorporated purchased Mirage Resorts for approximately $6.6 billion. The deal created MGM Mirage, which would eventually become MGM Resorts International, the largest casino company on the Strip. For Steve Wynn, this meant giving up control of the Mirage, Treasure Island, Bellagio, the Golden Nugget properties, and Beau Rivage. Everything he'd built over 3 decades. Why would he sell? There were several factors. The price was excellent. The company had grown large enough that taking it to the next level would require resources that a sale could provide. And perhaps most importantly, Steve Wynn had another plan. 5 weeks before the MGM deal closed, Steve bought the Desert Inn for about $270 million. The Desert Inn was a classic Las Vegas property, opened in 1950. It was where Howard Hughes had lived in the penthouse in the late 60s and early 70s. It sat on prime real estate on the Strip, at the corner of Las Vegas Boulevard and Sands Avenue. And Steve closed it down almost immediately. The Desert Inn's closure was announced as temporary, but everyone in Vegas knew what was really happening. Steve Wynn was clearing the chessboard. He was going to demolish a piece of Vegas history and build something new, something that would be his next statement project. He had cashed out of the empire he'd built, and now he was starting over with a blank canvas on some of the most valuable land on the Strip. First, though, he needed to form a new company. In 2002, Steve and Elaine Wynn took Wynn Resorts Limited public. The IPO gave them the capital they needed for what would come next. Steve began planning his most personal project yet, a resort that would literally bear his name. He was going to build Wynn Las Vegas. Chapter 8: Wynn Las Vegas and Encore. The Desert Inn was imploded in 2001, and construction began immediately on the site. What emerged over the next 4 years was Wynn Las Vegas, which opened on April 28, 2005. The price tag was approximately $2.7 billion, making it the largest privately funded construction project in United States history at that time. But more than the cost, what mattered was the vision. Wynn Las Vegas represented Steve's evolved philosophy of what a Las Vegas resort should be. There was no theme, no pirates, no volcanoes, no fountains out front. Instead, Wynn Las Vegas was about understated modern luxury. The tower was curved and covered in bronze glass. The grounds featured lush gardens and a revamped version of the old Desert Inn golf course, one of the only golf courses remaining on the Strip. Inside, every detail was obsessively curated. Custom carpets, museum-grade art integrated throughout the property, upscale retail, and restaurants from celebrity chefs. The philosophy was different from the Mirage or even Bellagio. This wasn't about spectacle you could see from the street. This was about a refined, curated experience for people who stayed at the property. The luxury was quieter, more sophisticated, more controlled. It was Steve Wynn saying that Vegas had matured past the need for over-the-top theming, that the city could offer experiences comparable to the finest resorts anywhere in the world. Wynn Las Vegas was successful, but Steve wasn't done. In December 2008, Encore Las Vegas opened, connected to Wynn Las Vegas as a sister tower with its own casino, restaurants, and theater. The Wynn and Encore complex at the corner of Las Vegas Boulevard and Sands Avenue became its own world, a self-contained luxury ecosystem at what was becoming the gateway to the Northern Strip. You could trace Steve Wynn's evolution as a developer through his projects. Golden Nugget was about proving luxury could work in an unexpected location. The Mirage was about spectacle and reimagining the resort model. Bellagio was about bringing European sophistication to Vegas. And Wynn and Encore were about ultimate refinement and control, about creating a curated luxury experience with his name literally on the building. By the late 2000s, Steve Wynn's influence on Las Vegas was impossible to overstate. He'd built or inspired nearly every major resort on the Strip. His design philosophy, his obsession with details, his understanding that Vegas could be about more than just gambling had become the industry standard. When other developers planned new properties, they were building in a world that Steve Wynn had defined. But Steve's influence wasn't limited to Las Vegas anymore. He'd taken his vision global. Chapter 9: Macau and the International Empire. In the early 2000s, Macau, a special administrative region of China, opened its gaming market to foreign casino operators. For decades, Macau's casinos had been run by a single concessionaire, but the government decided to license multiple operators, inviting companies from Las Vegas and around the world to bid for concessions. Steve Wynn won one of 3 initial gaming concessions. In 2006, Wynn Macau opened, exporting the Wynn brand of luxury design and service to what would quickly become the world's largest gambling market. Macau would eventually surpass Las Vegas in gaming revenue by enormous margins, and Wynn Resorts was positioned right in the center of that growth. The money flowing from Macau was staggering. Within a few years, Wynn Resorts Macau operations were generating more revenue than its Las Vegas properties. This gave Steve enormous capital and prestige, feeding back into his Vegas operations and his status in the industry. Later expansions in Macau, including Wynn Palace, which opened in 2016, cemented Wynn Resorts as a global player. By the 2010s, Steve Wynn was one of the most powerful people in the casino industry worldwide. His company operated flagship resorts in the 2 most important gaming markets on earth. His personal wealth was estimated in the billions. He served on corporate boards, advised politicians, and was courted by governments around the world looking to develop their own gaming industries. In 2017, Steve became finance chair of the Republican National Committee, giving him a direct line to the highest levels of American politics. He was influential, wealthy, and seemingly untouchable. His properties in Vegas continued to set standards for luxury and service. His brand was synonymous with the highest end of the casino industry. Everything Steve Wynn had built over 5 decades seemed secure. His legacy as the man who transformed Las Vegas seemingly cemented. But that legacy was about to be shattered by revelations about his personal conduct that had been hidden for years. Chapter 10. The Fall. On January 27, 2018, Steve Wynn's 76th birthday, the Wall Street Journal published an investigation that would end his career. The article detailed multiple allegations of sexual misconduct by Steve Wynn, spanning decades, with accusations coming from current and former employees of his casino resorts. The allegations were serious and disturbing. They described a pattern of behavior where Steve allegedly used his position of power to coerce employees into sexual situations, creating a hostile work environment where women felt unable to refuse advances from the boss without risking their jobs. Some of the alleged incidents dated back to the 1970s. The article described a corporate culture where complaints were allegedly suppressed and victims were reportedly paid settlements in exchange for silence. Steve Wynn denied the allegations, calling them false and suggesting they were politically motivated attacks. But the damage was immediate and irreversible. 10 days after the Wall Street Journal article was published, on February 6, 2018, Steve Wynn resigned as chairman and chief executive officer of Wynn Resorts. He also resigned as finance chair of the Republican National Committee. The man whose name was literally on the buildings was out, but resignation wasn't the end of it. Multiple lawsuits followed. Regulatory investigations were opened in Nevada and Massachusetts, where Wynn Resorts was building a new casino in Boston. Regulators wanted to know whether the company had failed to properly investigate and report allegations against its founder. Had executives known about the allegations and covered them up? Had the company protected Steve Wynn at the expense of employees? Wynn Resorts reached settlements with regulators in both states, paying millions in fines without admitting wrongdoing. The Massachusetts Gaming Commission came particularly close to revoking the company's license entirely, which would have been devastating for a project that had cost billions to develop. Ultimately, the company was allowed to keep its license, but only after demonstrating it had completely severed ties with Steve Wynn and reformed its corporate governance and workplace policies. Steve also went through a contentious divorce from Elaine Wynn, his second divorce from her after they'd remarried in 1991, following an earlier divorce in the 80s. Elaine remained on the Wynn Resorts board and became a key figure and reshaping the company's culture and leadership in Steve's absence. As part of his exit, Steve sold his entire stake in Wynn Resorts. The company he'd founded that bore his name was no longer his, and the company worked deliberately to distance itself from him. While they couldn't change the names of the properties without enormous expense, they removed his image from marketing materials, stopped mentioning him in corporate communications, and emphasized that he was no longer involved in any capacity. The legal battles continued for years. In 2024, the United States Supreme Court declined to hear Steve's appeal in a defamation lawsuit he'd filed against the Associated Press over its reporting on older misconduct allegations. The Nevada Supreme Court had ruled in favor of the Associated Press, and the U.S. Supreme Court's refusal to hear the appeal left that ruling in place. For someone who had spent 5 decades building his reputation and his brand, the fall was complete and brutal. The man who had obsessed over every detail of his properties, who had curated his public image as carefully as he curated his resorts, was now defined in the public eye by allegations of abuse and misconduct. Chapter 11: The Complicated Legacy. So, how do we think about Steve Wynn's legacy in Las Vegas? It's a question the city itself has been grappling with since 2018. On one hand, his impact on Las Vegas is undeniable. Before Steve Wynn, casinos were primarily about gambling, with hotel rooms and restaurants as afterthoughts. After the Mirage, Vegas became about integrated resort experiences, where gaming was just one component. He didn't just build hotels, he created destinations. The Mirage kicked off the 1990s mega resort era, bringing billions of dollars in investment to the Strip. Bellagio pushed Vegas firmly into luxury and cultural tourism, proving that the city could attract affluent visitors looking for more than just slot machines. Wynn and Encore set new standards for service and design in the 2000s. Nearly every major resort built in Vegas over the past 35 years has been influenced by concepts Steve Wynn pioneered or popularized. Walk down the Strip today, and you're walking through a landscape that Steve Wynn shaped. The emphasis on architecture and sightlines, with curved towers and carefully planned sight-blocking walls to create reveals. The presence of art galleries and fine dining in casino resorts. The understanding that spectacle and entertainment draw visitors who will then gamble, rather than assuming people come only to gamble. The massive integrated resorts that combine hotels, casinos, shopping, dining, and entertainment into single properties. All of this traces back to Steve's vision. His obsession with details became industry standard. The carpets, the lighting, the sound design, the way air moves through a casino, the scents pumped into public spaces. Competitors learned they had to match this level of attention to detail to compete. Vegas resorts became polished, sophisticated operations that needed to be constantly refreshed and updated to maintain their appeal. Beyond physical properties, Steve changed the business model of the Strip. Before him, casino companies were primarily about operating games and extracting maximum value from gamblers. After him, they became about creating experiences and selling luxury. The most important metric wasn't just gaming revenue, but total revenue per guest from all sources: rooms, food, beverage, entertainment, retail. This shift made Vegas resorts operate more like hospitality companies and less like gambling operations, which ironically made them more profitable. In terms of pure impact on the city's development and industry, Steve Wynn ranks among the most important figures in Las Vegas history. You could argue he's on the level of Bugsy Siegel, who built the Flamingo and helped establish the Strip in the 1940s, or Kirk Kerkorian, who pioneered the corporate mega resort model in the 60s and 70s. These are the people who defined what Las Vegas would become, but that legacy is now permanently complicated by how Steve Wynn allegedly treated the people who worked for him. The accusations describe someone who used power and position to exploit employees, who created an environment where people felt unable to refuse or speak up without destroying their careers. If the allegations are true, then Steve built his empire while harming the very people who helped him build it. This is where the story becomes difficult, because you can't separate the properties from the man. Every detail Steve obsessed over, every design choice he made, was implemented by employees working under him. The culture of excellence at his resorts was created by thousands of workers who, according to the allegations, sometimes worked in fear or under harassment. The luxury experience that guests enjoyed was provided by people who allegedly suffered in silence. Las Vegas has had to reckon with this contradiction. The Wynn and Encore properties remain major resorts on the Strip, still carrying Steve's name, still operating according to standards he established. But the company that runs them has worked hard to establish that. It's no longer his company, that it has reformed its policies and culture, that it represents something different now. Elaine Wynn, Steve's ex-wife and former business partner, has been part of this transformation. She remained on the Wynn Resorts board and helped guide the company through the crisis, advocating for cultural change and supporting the victims. In some ways, Elaine's continued involvement represents a form of redemption for the company itself, a separation from Steve's alleged misconduct while maintaining continuity with the operational excellence the brand is known for. Other Wynn properties, the ones MGM purchased in 2000, have long since been rebranded or transformed. The Mirage closed in 2023 and is being demolished and replaced. Treasure Island changed ownership and dropped much of its original theming years ago. Bellagio remains a crown jewel of the MGM portfolio, but MGM's ownership has allowed that property to have an identity separate from Steve Wynn's personal legacy. For Las Vegas as a city, Steve Wynn's story raises uncomfortable questions about the cost of transformation and progress. Yes, he helped turn Vegas from a regional gambling town into an international luxury destination. Yes, he created thousands of jobs and brought billions in economic impact. But at what cost to the people who worked for him? And does the grandeur of what was built excuse how it was allegedly built? These aren't easy questions, and Las Vegas hasn't fully answered them. The city continues to benefit from the tourist infrastructure Steve helped create, from the high-end reputation he helped establish, from the conventions and visitors drawn by the resorts he inspired. But it also has to grapple with the reality that one of the architects of modern Vegas was accused of serious abuses of power and position. In history, we often want our stories to be simple. Heroes or villains, successes or failures, good or bad. But real history is complicated. Real people are complicated. Steve Wynn built things that millions of people enjoy, that employ tens of thousands, that help drive the economy of an entire city. He also allegedly harmed people in ways that can't be undone, using his power in ways that were inexcusable. Both of those things are part of his legacy. Both of them are part of the story of modern Las Vegas. And both of them matter when we try to understand how this city became what it is today. Conclusion: the city he built. Today, if you stand at the corner of Las Vegas Boulevard and Flamingo Road and look up and down the Strip, almost everything you see exists in the world that Steve Wynn helped create. The massive resorts, the emphasis on luxury, the understanding that spectacle and experience drive tourism. Even properties built by competitors, built by people who never worked with Steve, are built according to principles he established. When Las Vegas and Encore still operate at the north end of the Strip, luxury resorts that consistently rank among the highest rated properties in Vegas. New developments like Resorts World, which opened in 2021 right next to Wynn, are designed to compete in the market segment that Steve essentially created. The Bellagio fountains still draw crowds every evening, one of the most photographed attractions in Las Vegas. Cirque du Soleil, which Steve brought to the Strip, now has shows at multiple properties. Fine dining in Vegas, world-class art and casino resorts, luxury shopping alongside slot machines, all of this is Steve Wynn's Vegas. But it's also a Vegas that has had to reckon with the darker aspects of its history, with the reality that power and money and influence can be used to harm as well as create. The post-2018 casino industry in Las Vegas has made at least surface-level changes in how it handles workplace complaints, how it monitors executives, how it responds to allegations of misconduct. Whether these changes are sufficient, whether they represent a real cultural transformation, or just better public relations, remains an open question. Steve Wynn himself largely disappeared from public life after 2018. He no longer holds any position in the company he founded. He no longer shapes Vegas development. His influence, once so enormous that he could essentially dictate trends for the entire Strip, has faded. The properties he built remain, but his personal role in the city's ongoing story has ended. In the end, Steve Wynn's time in Las Vegas is the story of transformation. He transformed himself from the son of a bingo operator into a billionaire casino mogul. He transformed the Golden Nugget from a downtown gambling hall into a luxury property. He transformed the Las Vegas Strip from a collection of aging casinos into the mega resort capital of the world. And in 2018, he was himself transformed almost overnight from an industry titan into a disgraced former executive fighting legal battles and facing allegations that permanently damaged his reputation. It's a Vegas story through and through. The spectacular rise, the enormous success, the obsessive attention to detail, and relentless pursuit of a vision, and then the dramatic fall. It has all the elements of a classic Vegas tale: ambition, money, power, creation, and destruction. When people visit Las Vegas decades from now, they'll still be walking through spaces Steve Wynn designed or inspired. They'll still be eating at restaurants in casino resorts, watching fountain shows, staying in luxury hotels that exist because Steve proved they could be profitable. His physical impact on the city will endure for generations, but they'll also, hopefully, know the full story. Not just the vision and the buildings, but also the allegations and the abuse of power. Because that's part of the story too. That's part of Las Vegas history. And understanding the full story, the complicated truth of how this city was built and by whom, is the only way to honestly reckon with what Las Vegas is and what it might become. Steve Wynn built modern Las Vegas, but he also reminds us that even the grandest buildings, the most spectacular fountains, the most luxurious resorts are still built by people. And people, no matter how visionary, no matter how successful, are capable of both creation and destruction, often at the same time. That's the story of Steve Wynn's time in Las Vegas. A story of transformation, ambition, success, and downfall. A story that helps explain how Vegas became what it is today and what that transformation cost along the way.